This is our last class of our series of Jesus with the People. So we have had a great fall talking about Jesus with the conversations he had with people, the emotional connection he made with people, the way he taught people. Rose Manning taught that class and it was awesome. We also had a night of worship, how Jesus worshiped with people, and we did that. And then last week was that Jesus called people that Robert Bonnie taught, and that was great. And tonight we're going to close out with Jesus interacted with different types of people. And I'm so excited about tonight because it's been great for me being able to study out this, and I know for Carrie as well. Jesus was all about people. God sent him here to interact with people. That was his whole purpose. But, I thought about, I actually haven't even told Carrie this, but I'm going to change what I told you, because that's fine. But, as I thought about all the things we've talked about, and as I think about December and the holidays that are upon us, when I think of this time of year, I think about family. I don't know if you're like that. Raise your hand if you think about family in a special way. You see family members that you don't typically maybe see, over Thanksgiving and Christmas. And it's just a special time where family comes together. Not only the church family, we have special things, which I love. Our family group is having a Christmas dinner party, and I know we just do special things that just really remind us of how loved we are. And it's awesome. Well, I decided tonight with my little section before Carrie comes up, and she's going to focus on something else, but I want to focus on Jesus with his family. I want to look at some of the ways that Jesus interacted with his own family. And I think it's going to inspire us. And the first thing I want to look at is in Luke chapter 2. We're going to kind of move around the Gospels a little as we look at this. But in Luke 2, okay, here we go. Luke 2 in verse 39. And we're going to read 39 through 52 real quickly. Okay? It says, "When Joseph and Mary had done everything required by the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee to their own town of Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Every year, his parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the feast, according to the custom. After the feast was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I would be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. Okay, so, this is a very special time in Jesus' life. We read initially where, he was brought up by amazing parents. I believe Joseph and Mary really God chose them to bring him up in the law of the Lord, to observe the Passover every year, the Feast of Passover. They made sure he went there, and it says that the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. But he grew up in a family. He grew up with two parents and siblings. Jesus had brothers and sisters, and I'm sure, just like many of us, it was a normal family, just the same challenges that we go through in family, Jesus faced as well with his siblings and with his parents. So we know that. But he was a special child, and we know that he grew up knowing the Ten Commandments and the law and how important it was for God to honor your father and mother. Jesus knew that. That was instilled in him from a very young age. And we also know that Jesus was without sin. So imagine him in the mix of his siblings, learning to show his parents that kind of honor, that kind of obedience, that kind of respect. And just, then this whole thing is just a horrifying account for any parent, as we've all read this and thought about it. And as I studied this out, I was made aware that at this age of 12 and then at 13, it's a very key age of a young man like Jesus. They're viewed differently, especially at the age of 13, but he was right in there becoming that. And so, his interaction with his mother, once, she was probably, I can't imagine, beside herself. And as she said, anxiously searching, why have you done this? I would have been screaming, like many of us have done in Costco or wherever when our kids, we can't find them and they're hidden inside a clothing thing or whatever. But he was so, serious with her that, didn't you know where I would be? In my Father's house. And I think a page was turned in her mind, I really believe, at this point, realizing, because it says she treasured these things in her heart. She knew he was different. She knew he was special. And Jesus, the other thing that's so interesting as we look at this is that Jesus was sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. He postured himself as a student and as someone who wanted to learn all that he could. And he was just entrenched in this setting, in this scenario, to learn and to grow as much as he could to take advantage of this time, the day of Passover that he and his family had come. When he said, didn't you know where I'd be? In other words, duh, but it's just incredible. This is where, we kind of begin with Jesus' real relationship, his interaction with his parents. And you just see his heart. So I think this is really key and important as we think about just the way that, Jesus, in some ways, I've always viewed this time more of, why did Jesus do this? It seems like he was disobedient, and this is horrible. But when you look at it differently, that Jesus really was, becoming a man in his own faith and in his own right. And this was a step he took, to God, for God, and his parents kind of went, oh, wow. And I think many of us, we see kids in our church all of a sudden become serious spiritually. You know what I mean? We see that step of faith that they take, and we go, wow, this is their own choice, their own step. And this was Jesus at a young age doing this, so it's really special. So this is the first thing that I want us to look at. But then I want us to look now in Mark chapter 6. We're going to read in verse 1. course, Jesus is already very into his ministry at this point. But it says in verse 1, it says, Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Where did this man get these things? They asked. What's this wisdom that has been given him, that he even does miracles? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, only in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his own house is a prophet without honor. He could not do any miracles there, except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. Now, there's other accounts in the Gospels of this, Jesus with kind of him introducing himself into his family and his hometown. All of us have a hometown, where we grew up, we have a reputation, we're somebody's kid or somebody's sister or brother or whatever. We know that feeling. And you have a reputation usually, right? You're known for something. He was a carpenter, and so here, the thing that we see, though, is, they're not that enamored by him, are they? In fact, they take offense at him. Like, who does he think he is? We played ball with him. They're like, who does he's like, they think he's kind of trying to show off or something. They're not easily impressed by him. And he even says, only in his hometown among his relatives is a prophet without honor. And he tells them that. And, Jesus was all about wanting to help people have the good news, find the good news, know God. That was his heart. And, of course, for more than anyone, I'm sure he wanted that for the people he grew up with, the people he loved, the people he knew best, and so that's tricky, that's hard, and I'm sure we can relate to that. We can relate to those feelings that Jesus had of not being just embraced with your new faith or your new heart for God and the things you're learning that you long to share with your family, with people you love, your aunts, uncles, cousins, even friends that you've grown up with who've known you all your life. But it's a normal thing for people to kind of go, who do you think you are? And to not be impressed. And Jesus faced that same kind of reaction here. And that wasn't easy. Let's look now in Matthew chapter 12. Okay, we're going to look now in verse 46. Okay, it says in verse 46, while Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside, wanting to speak with him. Someone told him, your mother and brothers are standing outside, wanting to speak to you. He replied, who is my mother and who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. And this really is a special time. Jesus has said this in other cases in the Gospels as well. But, I had always thought about this, that, that's a little rude to his family. Of course, they are outside. They're not where he is with this group of people. But he really makes a statement here that about the family of God and about the seriousness of our brothers and sisters in the faith, and as we are a part of the family of God, the value that the family of God has in the deepest of ways, and it's got to mean that to us as well, just like Jesus, my brothers and sisters and mother and father are here. It's God's people. That's who we are. And yet it wasn't to diss his mom and his brothers. That was not his intention. He wasn't trying to dishonor them. But he was, who knows, they were maybe, if you read prior, Jesus is having to deal with a lot of serious things, and he's getting quite the persecution, and it's serious, and his mom and brothers are probably worried about him, as we all would be if we were his mother. Maybe she wants to ask him a few questions, or give him a few of her thoughts about everything. And, and that's fine, and I'm sure Jesus would make time for them after he was done with everybody else. But he wasn't trying to dishonor them. So we know that. So he wasn't trying to be rude, but he was making the statement that, hey, we're family. We are sisters and brothers, and we're the family of God. And God wants us to have that priority in our hearts, that when we come together in that seriousness, that there's nothing more valuable to us than the family of God. So that's that. Now let's look at Mark 10. Okay. Mark 10. And we're not going to read all of this. We're familiar with it. But we're going to look at the rich young ruler, or the rich young man here. And just to see that Jesus, this guy comes up to him, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Verse 17. In Mark 10, verse 17. He says, why do you call me good? Jesus answered, no one is good except God alone. You know the commandments. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony. Do not defraud. Honor your father and mother. Teacher, he declared, all these I have kept since I was a boy. Jesus looked at him and loved him. One thing you lack, he said, go sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. And it goes on. But I just wanted to read this because we see, once again, Jesus calls this man to honor his father and mother. Along with the other things he called him to, the priority of family and of honoring your family, your parents, it was a very strong, devoted part of Jesus' heart and life. So we see that from this situation, and and Jesus, of course, knew this man's heart, but we just see the priority that Jesus had here for family, for his physical family. Look with me now in John 2, and this is one of my favorites of Jesus. Maybe it is probably is my favorite interaction of Jesus with his mother. We're going to start in verse 1. It says, on the third day a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Dear woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my time has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They did so, and of course, everyone was just amazed by the miracle and pleased. It was the highlight of the wedding, the best. Save the best for last, the wine. But I love Jesus here. Jesus, this was his first miracle. And it was prompted by his mother. His mom had a problem. She was, and we can relate, you're at your best friend's wedding and they run out of wine and your boy has some tricks, he can do something about it. And of course she goes to him and he is honorable to her. I think in some things that we've read, it can seem like, woman, why didn't and that's not what Jesus was like with his mother. In fact, as I studied it out, he was showing, it says here, dear woman, but he was respectful of her. And you know what? He did what she said. He made it happen. She really inspired him, and he honored her, and wow, this miracle took place, and it was incredible. But this is an example of Jesus honoring his mother, honoring God, and just, we can read about it here today and see just the power of God displayed through his heart of honor there. Okay, and then lastly, look in John 19, in verse 25. Okay. It says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary of Magdala. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, dear woman, here is your son. And to the disciple, here is your mother. From that time on, his disciple took her into his home. Jesus, at the most intense time in his life, when he was suffering to the point of being almost unconscious, he was near death, he was honoring his mother. He was thinking of his mom. And he was passing the torch. His father had long been gone, and Jesus had cared for his mother's needs, made sure that she was taken care of. He was the one making sure of that. And he was passing that baton now to his best and closest disciple, John. And he gave that responsibility to John at the cross. And we see his heart, how much he loved and valued his mother, that he had her on his heart. And that was the last thing that he did, to show her love and to show the priority that she was in his life and the honor that he had. Jesus never fell short of honoring his mother and father. He put God first in his heart, obviously, and in his actions and in his behavior, but he loved and cared for his family. And the question that I have for us as we think of everything that we've read tonight, and even as you read on your own in the Gospels, how can we imitate Jesus with our family? How can we? And I believe that, in the same way that Jesus always, his priority from, the first thing that we read today about him in the temple, learning, growing, I think that we need to set an example for our family members of our heart with God. That they know that nothing is more important to us than God. No one is more important to us than God. And that we love his word, we love learning, we want to please God. We can't help but talk about God and what he's doing. That it's just a natural thing. I think that's the most important thing we can do with our family members. Those in the faith and those not in the faith. That they see that we are, fully committed to God and have such a heart for him. And then secondly, I think by loving, caring, and being devoted to our family. No one knows me more than my family. No one knows the good, the bad, the ugly, the stories. No one could roast Maria better than my brother and sister. You guys, you know what I mean by that? We go back. We go way back. And nobody knows you like the people you've grown up with. But I believe in the same way that our family can bring out the best and the worst in you. You know that? But I think we've got to really pray, God, help me to be the most loving to my family. Help me to show them honor and love and respect. The way that I talk to them, the way that I answer them, the way that I whatever. And I'm not meaning, of course we're going to have fun and laugh, and that's one of the best part of families. But we still need to make sure that we express our love specifically, that we share our heart with our family. And then the last thing that I just want to mention is just that we're always praying for them, you know, praying for our family and wanting to share the gospel with them. And even over the holidays, having great talks with your family members, your grandchildren, your loved ones, friends you may see that you don't normally see that often. But, you know, having great talks with them and just praying that God will work to really open their heart to want to know more, and that you can really have that kind of an impact, because Jesus, with his family more than anything else, he was all about God, and this is the kind of example that we can be, I think, for our family as we imitate Jesus.
Guys, I gotta help Renee out real quick, because I'm sure she's staring at this stage and cringing. So let's Christmasify this podium. Isn't that pretty? You like that? Thank you so much, Maria. I sat down and she said how she changed it up from what we talked about. So I was like, don't worry, let me grab my pen. And I found a hair bow in my pocket. So I was like, take my phone and I'll take notes on that. And I found half of a Lego person. So it's still good though, we're still on the same page. But guys, I really am grateful to be here tonight, and I have really loved this series of SEC classes that have been focused on Jesus. I think that anytime you get a good opportunity to learn more about Jesus, it's a good opportunity to learn more about Jesus, so like jump on it, right? And then I was thinking about the last time that we had an SEC class. I was supposed to share it with Rob, and I kind of had FOMO that I wasn't here. It was a good thing I wasn't here, but then I also heard the just rumblings about the class and how it impacted so many people, and it was evident that it was the way it was supposed to be. But I still have this little FOMO thing ticking in the back of my head, and I said, Maria, so how about if we share this class? So I kind of hijacked her class so that I could come up here and talk about Jesus, because it's a great topic. But I wanted to start by asking you guys some quick questions. Who were Jesus' closest friends? Can you name some of them? John. Okay, we got John. Who else? Peter. Matthew. James. Mary, okay. We got a good handful there. We got some representation. There's Peter. He was one of them. I mean, maybe you're like, he wasn't really a friend. Peter caused a lot of problems. I think he was a friend. But can you guys think of just the people who followed him, the apostles, his disciples? Of those people, can you think about the professions that they had or that they're known for? What are the professions that come to your mind? Fisherman, yeah.
Tax collector.
We have a tax collector. Luke was a physician. I don't know that he was necessarily walking there with all of them, but we have a tax collector, a fisherman, a what? A doctor, okay. What else do we have? So Judas was good with money, but also bad with money, so he might have done something with money at some point. I don't know what was said, but I'm sure it was cool. But we also have a zealot, so I don't know, kind of like, what would they be today? Like a lobbyist or some, I don't know, very vocal figure. And I'm asking about all these people that Jesus surrounded him with, because I think it's really interesting. These were his closest friends. They walked with him, and they represented some of the most different professions. And I'm not saying a profession is your personality, but I mean, are any of you guys accountants? Does anybody know an accountant? Yeah?
Yes, back there.
Okay, we've got an accountant. All right, so we have an accountant. Is our accountants known for being the life of the party? Okay, so it's not your personality, but there are certain personalities that might be drawn to certain groups. What about artists? Do we have any artists in the house? All right, we've got a few of those. Would they be more of the life of a party than the accountant? Probably. We kind of see them in that. About engineers, do we have any engineers in the house? There's a certain type, right? You're like, these professions attract a certain type of people. And so I think it's pretty safe to say that as we look at Jesus' friends, we see how Jesus' friends earned a living before they started walking with him. It's also pretty safe to say that they were pretty different. I love the depiction of Matthew in The Chosen, and how Simon the Zealot and him just like butt heads all the time because they're so different. And Peter is just so out there. You see these personalities come to life. But that's why I love this topic about Jesus talking to different people. The way he surrounded himself with people that were just different from him. And sometimes when you're around people that are extremely different from you, it's a little bit difficult to just be, right? But that didn't bother Jesus. So as I was looking at this topic, I think that the type of people that he tends to interact with that is the most near and dear to my heart are those that are in marginalized groups. I love how Jesus talked to the marginalized people. What does marginalized even mean? I mean, Webster's got an opinion about every word, so I asked. And what Webster says, to marginalize is to relegate to an unimportant or powerless position within a society or group. Uh-oh, my half a Lego person fell. So, yeah, it's to make sure that the people who are unlike people that are the cool people don't have as much access to everything. And it's not necessarily always done with a rule or whatever, but it's something that perpetuates. And so historically, you look at people who are marginalized and they kind of live on the fringe of society. They live on the fringe of the in crowd. They're not people who are often invited inward. And because of this lack of representation, a lot of them lack resources. They might lack power. They don't have power to change their situation. They might not be able to express their preferences. And all of those things, just they're not available to marginalized groups. You know, marginalized people today are socially excluded. Marginalized people today are denied opportunities. Today they're denied access to healthcare, education, jobs, you keep going. Today they're despised, or worse, they might even be ignored. But how many of you have had to, in your careers, attend something akin to a diversity and inclusion type of program? Has anybody had to do that? A lot. Okay, so our society's trying. We're like, oh, it's not nice to exclude people. Let's see if we can do something about it. So we're trying, but you know, we're not there. Let's look at a couple of times when Jesus actually showed us. He set the example long before any of these diversity and inclusion programs came to be. He showed us how to love people who are on the outside of society, on the outside of what we're comfortable with. And I don't know if it's because Luke, and Miss Kathy was talking about him a second ago, Luke was a doctor. Like doctors, just the helping professions, they kind of have more of a heart attuned to the needs of the people. But we're going to look at Luke and what he says. He mentions the marginalized more than any other gospel. He focuses on and highlights how Jesus showed compassion. And I wonder if it has to do with the compassion that he had for people as a doctor. So let's look at, what do I have? Is this Luke 4? No. Let's look at Luke 18, 15 through 17. When you get there, it starts off by saying, people were also bringing babies to Jesus for him to place hands on them. When the disciples saw this, they rebuked them. But Jesus called the little children to him and said, let the little children come to me, do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. I don't traditionally think of children as marginalized. I don't think, like when I think of marginalized people, it doesn't come to my mind. But if you think about it, what your experience as a child, generationally, is very different, also culturally, but sometimes you might have experienced the children are to be seen and not heard type of situation, and you know, you carry that with you. I don't know if any of you guys have ever gotten on a flight and it's a long flight and you sit down and you're nice and comfy and then this ginormous boisterous family comes barging down the middle aisle, knocking the seats, stuff dragging behind them, and they've got a toddler and a baby and they sit down right behind you. And I wonder if any of you just had this feeling of just elated and feeling overjoyed by that. I am usually that family that does that to people, and I can let you know that I hear sighs of, and then afterwards, sometimes if the kids had a good flight, I hear, wow, they were actually quiet. I didn't hear them. Like I hear amazement. So it's not a common thing for kids to be something that you want to be around on a long flight. Or what about, I don't know if anybody's particular or likes things to be a certain way. I like things a certain way, and I think one of the most annoying things to me is when I actually finally get things the way I want them, and then a toddler enters the room just excited because it's like a blank canvas where they can cause chaos. And I'm just like, or if you're fine with noise, you don't care about, the debris that they leave behind them, maybe you just would never consider asking their opinion on anything because their minds are not developed, and what are they even going to tell you? It's going to be some nonsense. I think regardless of how we view kids, if we just love them with all of our hearts, or if we kind of were like, I could do without, I think that it's safe to say that we probably wouldn't ever look at it as, I respect children so much. They are so respectable. I just, the way they walk around with their faces all covered in chocolate and don't even care, I just respect that. The fact that that baby can have the diaper hanging down to the ground and just get her job done, I respect that. Like, that's not something that we say. But that's not Jesus. Jesus respected those who are disrespected. And you see him doing that with these little kids. He's like, no, guys, you actually want to be like them. Look at the purity of their hearts. He respected that about them. We see Jesus doing this. We see him doing his thing, teaching. He's telling parables. He's talking about the Pharisees behind their back, but in front of their face. And his disciples are like, yeah. And then this family sits behind him on the airplane and they tackle him. And Jesus goes on. And it's more important to him that they're elevated than the disciples are encouraged to continue their little security detail next to him. Because Jesus wants to show that it's important to respect those who are generally disrespected. Let's take a look at Luke 8. Again, Mr. Luke showing this compassionate Jesus.
Come on here.
Luke 8, verse 40, it says, now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him, touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. But Jesus said, someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me. I'm sure Jesus sounded way cooler than that, by the way. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, he said. Don't bother the teacher anymore. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid. Just believe, she'll be healed. When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. Stop wailing, Jesus said. She is not dead, but asleep. They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, my child, get up. Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. I don't know if I would have been able to follow through with that order, tell nobody what just happened. But this is craziness. I know we've heard this over and over. I think we've even recently visited the bleeding woman, so there's so many things to dissect from this passage of scripture. But it's just craziness right here on just a different level. Jesus is a Jewish man, right, living in a Jewish society that highly regards people who devote their life to things like taking care of the temple, to teaching others about what the scrolls say. And this is a leader in one of those synagogues. And we know, because we've read some of these different gospels, we know that Jesus kind of stands out in this society a little bit. Crowds follow him, but he specifically stands out to this in crowd in the society because he tends to ruffle all of their feathers in all the wrong and right ways. They're all right ways, but they feel like they're wrong. And one of these leaders who actually respects Jesus asks for help. So I think that's pretty significant because it's unheard of. It's especially unique that this leader came, and he's got a position of authority, but he came to Jesus, one, in belief, two, in vulnerability, and he was pleading with him to come heal his daughter. So you see that, and that's pretty remarkable. And we just saw how Jesus talked about children. This guy is asking him a very special favor to go take care of a child, and Jesus loves children. That he made that obvious. And this little girl's only 12. She's not going to reach her 13th birthday. She's about to die. And so we see Jesus here. His heart's with Jairus. He's going to go take care of this, and he's on a mission because he's going to go take care of this little girl. And then something unnoticeable happens. Something unnoticeable from someone who desires to be unnoticed happens. And we know, because we just read the scripture, we know that Jesus is going to take care of the little girl. But this posse that's with Jesus, his friends, don't know that. They look at Jesus and they're like, this guy of power, this guy that most people in his circle hate you, he actually kind of likes you a little bit, and he's trusting in you, and he really needs you. You just don't want to put him on hold. Don't keep him waiting. Come on, we got to focus. We got to keep it moving. And I think sometimes that's the way we think. We look at titles. Nobody walks up into their first day of kindergarten and is like, "What's up, Deb? I'm Carrie." My son actually tried to do that in kindergarten. His teacher was a fresh out of college grad, and he grew up in the campus ministry, so he was like, "What's up?" She had to shut it down really quickly because he didn't respect her title, right? But we do. We call him Mrs. whatever. She was Miss McGuire. We look at power. If we start a new job and we recognize the big boss, we're not going to sit there and just be on our phone, like whatever, while the big boss is walking by. We sit up straight and we type faster or whatever we do. We pay attention to that, right? And when your boss calls you, you pick up the phone. Unless you're Kate and your boss is calling for help on about a headband, and you just don't care, then you just send her to voicemail, and then she has a crisis. I'm just kidding. Okay, I just wanted to put her on blast because she likes attention, so I wanted to I'm just kidding, she doesn't. All of those things are nice. But anyway, so we pay attention to those things. If you get a subpoena, you're going to clear your schedule and you're going to show up to court as you should because consequences come. But Jesus made a huge statement here because he knew all of those things. He knew this was an important guy. And he even appreciated this important guy being humble and having faith. It was huge for him too, but he prioritized the marginalized over taking care of this powerful person. Jairus had a 12-year-old daughter. For 12 years, he loved that daughter. He protected that daughter. He cared for that daughter. And now he was humble, but fighting for that daughter's life from a position of authority, of status. Jesus used his divine authority to look at the woman who for 12 years had been without family because Jewish law made it that way. She couldn't be in contact with her family. She was ostracized. She'd likely been abandoned by all. For 12 years, she was a nobody. And Jesus took that time and said, today I'm going to make her somebody. She's going to be a daughter. I'm going to pay attention to her. And she's priority over the one who I'm going to take care of and I love with all of my heart, but over the one who has been loved and taken care of and has someone there interceding on her behalf. He stopped so that he could take care of her. Jesus elevated the marginalized woman who only hoped for freedom from bleeding, but he gave her an adoption into family. And this is only just one of the examples. We know that Jesus does this over and over. He shows respect. When you feel disrespected, he shows respect to you. He sees you. And he prioritizes those who are marginalized. And that's it. We're pretty close to 8:30, I think. I don't know if we wanted to break up. Is that
Well,
that the plan?
we can, a little, we can until 8:30.
If you guys would like to break into groups or fellowship, I think those are great options. Yeah? All right, thank you, ladies.